Hello, nerd friends. How is everyone doing tonight? Hello and welcome to the Friday night live stream. Today it is a special stream because you guys have been wanting to talk a lot about international relations, and I'm a dumbass when it comes to international relations. I mean, I can't keep information in my head enough to make sense of it. I mean, I think it's already so overloaded with Indian politics. I'm like, अब दुनिया का भी देखने का है क्या? That is where I stop. So today, what we are going to do is we have a very fun guest on our stream today, Suhasini Haidar, who is from the Hindu, and she's a very experienced foreign policy journalist. So we are going to talk to her. Before I get to her, she's waiting in the background. Before I get to her, some channel announcements. Tomorrow, I'm doing Democracy IRL in Bombay. So if you are in Bombay, Bandra, 6 o'clock, Jashn Studios. So you can come and get a ticket for that and get it. Link is in the description below. And we have shows in Hyderabad and Nagpur now. Yes, so 26th, 27th. So 26th Hyderabad, 27th Nagpur. So if you're in Hyderabad or Nagpur, please book your tickets. Bombay ka is filling fast. Some seats are left. Hyderabad ka has already started filling. So if you are someone from either of these cities, please come. And then without further ado, let me call in Suhasini on screen. Just a second. Hello Suhasini. How are you doing?
Hi, Meghna.
Hi. This is going to be a novel experience for you, no?
I have to say though that I'm seen mostly as a foreign policy nerd as well. So
No,
it's,
but
it's
have you ever
different
done?
types of nerds. That's all.
Yes, but have you done like highly interactive live streams before?
Well, I mean, as a journalist, especially given the times, I think it's necessary. And if you ask me, Twitter is like a non-stop
That's
feed
true.
in your
That's true.
mind the whole time.
Do you like Twitter?
It's a very useful platform. So every time somebody says we're going to boycott Twitter, we're going off Twitter, they're shadow banning us and all that, I say, but why? For a journalist, it's a very good
Yeah.
platform to have. It's like a news stream.
Yeah.
So you don't need to subscribe to a ticker service.
Yeah.
You know pretty much what's going on. The other is you get instant feedback. You may not like the feedback, but you get instant feedback.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. And also, like, I don't know, I've been addicted to Twitter since 2008. I was like one of the first few
yes.
people who came on it. And I find like information consumption very useful. But recently, do you feel that it has become kind of garbage? I mean, I feel like that at least.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I have a very weird kind of timeline, and I
Probably.
only go to the timeline that I'm following. I don't go with Twitter's recommendations.
Fair enough.
So I just pretty much stay in my little bubble, and it's possible to do that on Twitter. But remember, now look around the world. There are leaders, there are governments that make their first announcements on Twitter before
Yes,
they even put out a statement. How
that's
can a
true.
journalist not be on that kind of a platform? And if you remember, at one point we even had the government say, "Oh, we don't like Twitter. We have a problem with Twitter," and then go off to I think there was another thing called coup,
Yeah, cool. Yeah,
and a
that's
few
gone
years
now.
later, yeah, I don't know where coup is anymore, but they're certainly back. But there was a period in which the government was actually putting out its tweets first on that medium.
Correct.
And I thought about moving, but I think by the time I thought about moving, they moved back. So
Yeah, yeah. Coup is dead, by the way. That's the news. So it died quite recently because nobody moved away from Twitter. As easy as that. Uh,
yeah.
but okay, so today, Suhasini, I have gotten you here because I want you to interact with my community here who have a lot of questions about foreign policy, etc. And I have a lot of questions about foreign policy. So, so today's agenda basically is that we're going to start with Israel, Palestine, Middle East, kya ho raha hai, just generally. As you see, the title of this is World War III, because apparently on YouTube that's doing very well. Thank you, YouTube.
I did see that, and I mean, sadly, you start wondering, are we actually in those times? So it may not just be clickbait. It may not just be
True.
sensationalism. These are real concerns.
And also, I heard this one thing. Someone I was talking to. It was a very interesting thing. So they said, a historian. They said that in World War II, think about it. Till the middle of World War II, nobody was calling it World War II. Post facto, they looked back and said, like, "Oh, the
He said,
entire world is at war. Okay, now this is a world war."
well, also because the entire colonized world just was forced into joining.
Yeah, yeah. So
So,
I mean,
no.
we might be like somewhere. I don't know where we are on that scale. But do you think
Yeah.
we are in World War III?
No, I
No.
don't think so. But I think if by the parameter that you have a situation where you have people behaving extremely badly, to put it mildly, without caring about the global order, deep senses of grievance and polarization on both sides. And 100 years ago or in 1940s, the UN didn't exist. Now it's like the UN is there, but it's not existing. I mean, even the UN is under fire.
I don't even
So
know what they're doing, honestly.
yeah, well, we should talk about that
Yeah, yeah.
definitely.
So other than that, we are also going to touch a little bit upon Modi ji's foreign visits, and if we get time, we are going to talk a little bit about our neighborhood as well. So that's
Or
the just 3 point general agenda. Lots of questions. I want to start with the Middle East, right? And I think it's a good thing to begin with. What is the United Nations doing even?
sure. The fact is that the United Nations has, from the beginning of the conflict, been making the appeals. The first appeals were, of course, in the beginning when, and if we are going to mark October 7th as the beginning of this conflict, and certainly this part of the conflict, as soon as it happened, it was a terror attack, and it was a really, really brutal terror attack. I think the whole world was shocked, and I think that for that 24-hour period, Israel really had the solidarity of the world, because everybody who has faced terror attacks and felt that helplessness was feeling that this had just gone too far, and this was it was unforgivable, really. And I'm one of those journalists who was shown some of the videos of that time, and it's really, really brutal, and non-human, in the way people were killed. But since then, I think world opinion has shifted, and it has shifted primarily because the idea is that if you believe that what happened was a terror attack, and let's remember, India calls it a terror attack, but India has not designated Hamas as a terrorist organization.
Also Hezbollah, right?
Hezbollah as well.
Yeah.
So the fact is that if you believe it's a terror attack, and you believe that Hamas essentially carried out a terror attack, I don't know what the difference between an act and then the organization really is. But then you don't expect a state to behave in the same way.
True.
In other words, this idea of revenge and the idea of reprisal and the idea of it being, khoon ka badla khoon type is something you don't expect a state to do.
Correct.
And since then, what everyone has watched Israel do is essentially do exactly what it feels like without caring about what the international law says. And when international law comes up against Israel, they essentially say, you're biased. We don't need to listen to you. So
Yeah.
just look at this. When you were asking about the United Nations, first, the UN is not doing what it's supposed to do, which is to keep the peace, right?
Yeah.
Or to ensure never again is a population targeted for its ethnicity or its religion or any other thing. That's what the UN came into power,
Yeah.
into being for. So it's not able to protect people. It's not able to protect civilians and children. I mean, 15,000 children are amongst the 40,000 plus people who have died in Gaza.
Yeah.
So even if you were to accept the Israeli point of view, which is that many of them were Hamas terrorists and they were hiding in the civilian population, you have to ask the question, 15,000 kids, really? And then the third, which I think is becoming more and more, difficult to watch, is the fact that the United Nations is not able to protect their own. So 135.
Wasn't there an attack yesterday where
That's
a
right.
missile was fell on
No,
some
there were 3 attacks, they said,
Okay.
on what is called UNIFIL. It's the
UNIFIL, yes.
UN forces in Lebanon,
Yeah.
which are made up, I think it's a 10,000 strong force, but it's made up of different nationalities. India has about 903 soldiers in that force. And they essentially populate a line in Lebanon. which is supposed to be the kind of line after which, they ensure that there are no Hezbollah fighters targeting Israel from there. But the fact is that they were targeted by Israel. There were actually direct mortar attacks, and even someone like the
One
Italian
second.
Prime
So they are supposed to stop Hezbollah attacks for Israel, and Israel is the one who attacked them.
correct.
Why?
Well, you see, this is the whole point, that Israel is now in that place where it is there. There are no stops on it. There are no international law stops really on it. They claim, and the ambassador spoke to me a few days ago, and they claim that we have lawyers always with us, backing every attack. But if you see the attack you're talking about just now, two peacekeepers were injured, but so many others were targeted in a sense. And you have someone like the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, famous
Yes.
for other reasons in India,
Yes.
someone who is very right wing, who backs Israel on everything, who has said this didn't happen by mistake. You didn't just happen to target terrorists and get the UN. You were directly targeting the UN. So UN can't protect itself. In Gaza, in 1 year, 135 UN personnel have been killed. The UN RWA, that it's called the UNRWA, that actually looks after Palestinian refugees, Israel has decided it is a Hamas organization because some of its employees were believed to be involved in the October 7th attacks. Now,
Oh.
now, in that investigation, what has emerged, although they couldn't find direct links to most of the people named, 9 people have been found or have been sacked, shall we say. But it's an organization of 12,000 people
Yeah.
working with Palestinian refugees in a Hamas controlled territory, essentially. So the UN hasn't been able to protect them. And then get this, the UN Secretary General can no longer visit Israel. Antonio Guterres had a visa ban put on him last week. And
Okay.
yeah, exactly. And that is really like, that cuts at the UN Charter. The UN
So
Charter actually says in
is Israel like sort of, I don't know, like is it like rebelling against the United Nations now technically?
absolutely, absolutely. If you listen to even Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech at the UN General Assembly, he called it a swamp of anti-Semites. Um,
Wow.
and the whole point being that it is Israel versus the UN. In fact, now that you pointed out, I think it's a piece I should just write about how this is emerging as the new thing. And the real irony, in a sense, is, why did the United Nations come together? Because of the way the Jewish people were treated
Yes.
during the Holocaust, and their
Yes.
one motto was never again.
Yeah, it
Uh,
basically it like reversed, like it's very ironic. It's very bizarre what you're saying. That's what I was also thinking about. Another thing I wanted to ask यहाँ पे was what is wrong with Israel? Like just a very general question. It has been bombing Gaza incessantly, as you said. So many people died, so many women and children died. I saw that names list, and like what 7 pages is full of kids of zero
But
age.
it's 18 pages. It takes, I think, 59 minutes to read out the names of every person
Oh
who's
my
missing
god!
or dead.
Now when you say something like this, it kind of makes you think. A, what is Netanyahu thinking, right? And why is he like on this doing this bloodbath essentially? And also, why is the West supporting him? We are still, I'll come to us, but why is, say, US, UK? Also, another thing I wanted to also ask, connected, is like, organizations like CNN, etc., whenever a attack happens on like a Lebanon, they never mention Israel. It's like, Beirut attack, some people killed. Arey, but who attacked? They never say this. So, what is going on with Israel and the West?
Okay, so to begin with, one has to understand that what happened in Germany in the 1940s is something you cannot discard. It's not a memory that fades. When you think about the millions of people who were targeted, put into concentration camps, killed mercilessly in gas chambers. So that is a shared memory that the entire people in Israel really carry. Many of them are survivors, many of them are children of survivors or grandchildren of survivors. That does not go away. The idea that they were so, sort of really, really diabolically targeted. So that is a part of that nation's creation. Since the nation was created, and let's be clear, the nation was was a piece of land where Palestine stood. It was called the State of Palestine.
Yes.
And the British at the time decided that this is where the Jewish population will come and settle. And of course, there's a historical relationship as well over
Correct.
there. Um, but without getting into too much of the nitty gritty, essentially, since then, the Israeli population has been at a kind of a war with the people who originally lived over there. Over the decades, there have been wars like the Six-Day War that was fought. There have been others. There are like bombings done by the PLO. You remember waves of suicide bombings and buses bombed in Israel that took place. And there has been this kind of constant tension with Gaza, which is an area, so Palestinians live in two areas, basically the West Bank area,
Yeah.
which is more peaceful in a sense. It's got a proper government, which is run by the old PLO now, the Fatah. Uh, and then there was Gaza, where you have these 2 million people. And Gaza essentially in 2006, 2007 voted the Hamas in.
Yes.
Uh, and then they never had another election. Hamas just turned into this really, really authoritarian force, killing people, even of their own people, but essentially controlling the whole area. It is an area that is totally cut off because there's the Egypt border, which is sealed
Yes.
more or less. There's Israel around it, and then there's the sea. So even things like drinking water is an issue there, and it has become over the years. It's just been growing and growing. So this population has a problem, of course, with the Israeli population as well. So if you look at Israel's neighbors, they don't really have many friends. Although over the decades they built ties with Egypt, they built ties with Jordan. And in the last decade, they had the Abraham Accords, which you would have heard of, which had them tie up with the UAE, with Morocco, and I think Bahrain was the third. So now you have a situation where Israel has, I could be wrong on that, which are the three of the Abraham Accords, but you have a situation where Israel was slowly beginning now to make new friendships in the area. But its biggest enemy has always been Iran.
Yeah.
Iran
That's what
and
I was coming to. Yeah.
Iran's proxies, as they are called, or groups that are funded by Iran, which include Hezbollah, which are believed to include Hamas, and include other groups. I think you have
Houthis
a
also,
map
right?
somewhere there.
Yeah,
You have a
yeah.
map over there that they support the Houthis. Then there are things called the Kitab Hezbollah, I think in
Oh. Mm. Sorry guys, just a second. My browser just randomly crashed. Whenever I open that map, my browser crashes. I don't know why.
violence, if you like. And I think that
Uh,
is
so
something that really,
sorry. My connection went off just a second. Just
okay.
some issue happened. Every time I seem to open that map, my browser
Yes,
crashes.
so we'll
So
do away with it. So
yeah, just a second. Just a second. Just hold on. Yes, I think we are set again. Okay. Yeah.
all right. So what I was just saying is that there is this constant fear. Meghna, if you go to Israel and they do conduct journalist tours, and I've been on that. I've also been to cover Prime Minister Modi's visit, which is the first prime ministerial visit from India to Israel. So when you go to Israel, one of the first things they do with journalists is they put you in a helicopter and just take you up, and you actually go towards the Golan Heights. And what they're essentially showing you is that if I look to the right, you can see Jordan. If I look to the left, you can see the sea.
Right.
And the idea is that you're essentially saying, I have a very thin country. If you look at the map of Israel, it's called a
Yeah.
dagger.
Yeah.
And are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm able to hear you. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And essentially, there is a sense of insecurity. It's
Right.
made worse by, of course, what Israel itself does to the population that makes it very difficult. So after what happened on October 7th, I think Israel's Israel sort of decided that it was going to look for a new solution, because after all, they have tried bombing Gaza before. Over the last 10 years, I think there have been maybe 4 or 5 really serious bombardment campaigns of Gaza by Israel in exchange for rocket fire into Israel. But those have not, essentially Hamas remains in power. So I think
Yeah.
the decision was that Hamas has got to go.
So are they out to now just flatten the Gaza Strip? I mean,
That's
like,
what it's
it looks,
looking like.
yeah, from what it
They,
looks
they
like.
deny it. I mean, they deny that the plan was to just flatten Gaza and make sure there's no place for Palestinians to live there.
Yeah.
But just look at the territory, the pictures that come out now.
Yeah,
Uh, you know,
it's a wasteland essentially. Like there is no
it's
water, there
just
is no food.
rubble. It's just rubble. And if people have to go back to their homes, like in the biggest city there, Gaza City, if they have to go back, it will have to be rebuilt. That could take years. Somebody is going to have to pay for it. Who is going to pay for it? I think that is a huge, big question, because Israel did the bombing, but Israel says we're not responsible. It's Hamas that was hiding there.
But that's the thing, right? You know, all these reports of like they're falsifying a lot of reports, and the Western media is helping them do it. Like it's very obvious now. It's in your face almost. Where they attack a hospital and they say there's a tunnel inside, and then they go inside and there's nothing. Then they place some random things and then they make like propaganda videos. It's very weird, and they're doing it very badly also, honestly. So again, I'm repeating that same question, right? What is in their mind exactly? Like, were you able to sense it? Like, do they just want to kill everyone? Because that's ridiculous.
So the question about what is the end game
Yeah.
is the idea that they should have peace, and I think there are 3 parts to it really. One is that Israel wants to go ahead with its original plan of the Abraham Accords, make peace with Saudi Arabia, which is the last piece in that puzzle, if you like. And then start all kinds of connectivity operations. Remember I2U2 that India signed on to as well, which was Israel, India, UAE, and the US. It's non-existent right now, because the UAE can't work with Israel at this point. What about 1 year ago at the G20? The big noise was about IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. That's also, they haven't even been able to meet the entire group even once, even though they were supposed to be 90 days after their launch. They haven't been able to meet in more than 365 days. So what you're seeing is essentially that, I think, is one goal for Israel, that if they have this kind of peace, then they can go in for prosperity and then have trade and connectivity and all.
Yeah.
That's one. And they work on the idea that people will just forget about the plight of the Palestinian people.
But that's a very like, that's a very strange thing to.
It is, but this is now a different world. It's BB world, if you like, where they have convinced themselves that actually, the Arab countries are not happy with Iran and what it's doing, and of course there are old rivalries there, and so they will tacitly okay whatever we're doing. So that's one. I think the other is the political survival of Netanyahu himself. Just before October 7th happened, he was nearly out of power.
Yeah.
And so, to have this kind of a war has at least helped him refurbish his image. And then all the recent successes he has seen in terms of the killing of Haniyeh, the Hamas negotiator.
Was that the pager attack? That
No, that was the one that was done in Iran, where there was a kind of drone strike assassination.
Oh, okay, drone strike. Yes,
Yeah,
correct. Yeah.
so that was Haniyeh. Then there was the pager attacks that killed a lot of Hezbollah. And then there is the killing of the top leadership of Hezbollah as well.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about this as well. So, because we are bringing in Iran right now, right? So that map is finally open.
And just before you get to that, the third is really the idea that, one thing Netanyahu has particularly been wanting to push home is the idea that it is our existential war is with Iran. He wants essentially that there be no countries dealing with Iran. So, for example, that JCPOA, there was a nuclear agreement between countries and Iran, which got scrapped when Trump came to power. That's something Israel under Netanyahu has really been pushing for. So this kind of a scenario where the US is essentially backing Israel versus Iran is something they want. And while it's not close to your World War III theory, it is that is the idea: is get the whole world involved in choosing sides, if you like.
I mean, the Russia-Ukraine war is already doing that, and now this is one more. So now both of those conflicts are somehow connected. One started earlier, so then it is again the Axis versus Allies sort of situation again happening, weirdly enough. But tell me more about Iran. So. Okay, one thing I want to say to chat first. Chat, listen, we are just setting context, okay? Like, this was basically Suhasini giving us information about what happened with Israel and then what is happening now, etc. You have to understand she's a journalist. So she's going to be very fact based and she's going to give you facts. So, she's not the person who you should ask कौन से side पे हो. Okay, ये नहीं होता है यहाँ पे. Okay, so we are giving you information right now. Taking sides is your call, right? If you ask me personally, I feel like what is happening in Gaza is horrifying. It is terrible. I don't like what Israel is doing. I mean, that is at least my stand. Okay. No, sorry, Suhasini, I have to say this because comments may I can
Sure.
see like...
No, and I understand that, I've been giving talks in different parts of the country, and I can see that there is such discomfort, to be polite, with what Israel is doing.
Yeah.
And that's what I keep trying to say, that, while we have on our televisions, if you notice, this kind of complete backing for Israel, there is an entire, I think, under everywhere else, a kind of real discomfort with what Israel has done in the last year. Because at the end of the day, we all understand that terrorism it's unacceptable. The attacking of civilians is unacceptable. But then you can't go and attack civilians with the idea that you are ending terrorism.
Yeah.
Because you then become the same.
Yeah. And also, like, using it as an excuse to just flatten an entire area is just... And the bombings, right? The way they are doing it is also so horrifying. It's so impersonal and cruel. It almost makes you think like... I mean, it's. I keep telling my chat also, like, think of it also from a military industrial complex sort of viewpoint also, like weapons suppliers who are very happy whenever a war goes on and then they're supplying weapons, etc.
And it's dehumanizing. You're essentially saying, I need to get that one target, and if 2,000 people die.
Exactly. And that's
it's fine.
Chalking it off as collaterals, apparently.
Yeah, and it is really dehumanizing, because essentially you're saying none of those people count. And, and it's not possible, even though most journalists have left Gaza. A record number of journalists have been killed in Gaza.
Yeah,
I think the number is more than 100. And most journalists have left Gaza, but even so, you can see those images coming out.
Right.
And you can't just play them off as, oh, this is all doctored, this is all one-sided, and the kind of counter propaganda, if you like, that we keep hearing.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Iran. So there are like three sort of larger groups that we are looking at essentially in this whole thing. First is, of course, Hamas, which is active in Gaza, which you can see in the middle chat if you can see the map. Then there is, of course, Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon. And there is Houthis, who are in Yemen. And all of them are sort of semi-supported by Iran or backed by Iran, allegedly. I don't know exactly how deep that is. And then there is Syria and Iraq, which are Iran-influenced territories, right? So one thing I thought about when I saw this map was, Israel is completely isolated, right, in the middle. Can you say that? Because I'm also wondering of their, like sort of neighborhood as well, Egypt and what is going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, except that if your best friend is the most powerful country with more weapons than, all the other nations put together, i.e. the United States, then it's a little easier to live that isolation. But yes, you're absolutely right. Netanyahu himself, when Prime Minister Modi went there, said, if I were to stand up in Israel and look to my east, I would just keep going, and the first democracy I would really see is India. I mean, it's a bit of an exaggeration. There are democracies in the middle, but his point was that this is entire area is just a bunch of what he calls the crescent of chaos. Those countries that you just mentioned, he
Yeah.
calls it a crescent of chaos, and he says, do you want to be that side, or do you want to be on the side of the peace and balance or whatever? But the truth is, as you pointed out, that nobody really is associating with them. Even in Europe, if you see now, and I think one of your viewers had asked about that, even in Europe, countries are increasingly turning much more critical of Israel. And then you have countries that are doing what they've never done before. Of course, India recognized Palestine way back when, I think in the 70s. But you have three countries like Spain, Ireland, and Norway, after what we have seen, actually recognizing Palestine.
Right.
You have Macron, the French president, really being very critical of what Israel is doing and going to saying to Lebanon, "We stand with Lebanon." Of course, it's a French-speaking population and all of that. And then you have, as I said, the Italian prime minister speaking out. So even in Europe, which used to at least, notionally give him some support, you're seeing Netanyahu is quite isolated. India is perhaps friendlier to Israel today.
Israel.
I mean, the Indian government, I should say, is friendlier to Israel than many of these countries are.
Yeah. Also, like Omkar here is pointing out that Israel has influence over Jordan and Egypt.
Well, the fact is that there's a lot of money that does have to change hands. Remember, Jordan is hosting, I forgot the exact numbers, but millions of Palestinians who were driven out in 1948 and then in 1962 and then after that. And there are, there are reparations made to them as well. Israel has consistently pointed out that it provides water, because Israel has the best water technology in the region, to Palestinian refugees in various parts. Israel and Egypt had a major accord, which was why one of their leaders was in fact assassinated.
Yes.
So Israel has built connections with these countries. Even if today they wanted to go ahead and have those talks, like for a long while, I think Saudi Arabia really wanted to move ahead from this entire
Yeah.
current crisis and start the talks with Israel. But it's not possible right now. And I can tell you that even in these monarchies, even though they have so much control, the mood on the street is so angry with Israel. That's another concern. And, I have to ask the question. You were asking it earlier. I wish I had an answer to what is the end game. Even if that end game was to be everything that Netanyahu desires, he doesn't want a two-state anymore. He wants a single state where obviously Palestinians will live as second-class citizens. Israelis don't like the term apartheid state. I see some of your viewers are using that. They don't like that term. Of course, it is a term meant for South Africa. It's not. You can't necessarily move it. But they are treating Palestinians as a second-class citizenship without the same rights to land. And even if they were to get everything they wanted, would they be more secure?
No, they
After having
won't.
put up
See,
these
again, like
walls,
what they're essentially doing right now is, I mean, simply, if you look at it very simply, by bombing this one area, by starting, like, I mean, if you just look at this map, the attacks that they're doing all across the place now, pager attacks in Lebanon, they're sending missiles into
they
Iran,
bombed an
Yemen,
embassy in Syria. They bombed the Iranian embassy and killed an
Syria.
IRGC commander in Damascus. I
Yes.
mean, bombing somebody else's embassy is considered a real no-no in
So
international
they
law.
are basically pissing off their entire neighborhood. How can they be peaceful after that? For years. Like, I mean, they're just making enemies left, right, center. The only reason why they survive is because of the West.
That is correct. That is correct. It's also true that Israel has been very resilient. It's come through, imagine an attack like this one with 1,200 Israelis being slaughtered in one morning. There's no comparison because you look at different attacks, but I mean that was a particularly bad attack, and they are able to come back. They do have a culture of everyone goes into the military. They've pulled up their reserves. I think 3 or 4 times people who have gone back to work have been brought back by the Israeli military. So they are also part of that fight back, but they can't sustain it without a lot of Western backing, both for the
Right.
military supplies as well as for money. Someone was saying today that the cost of the war of the last year is about $60 billion.
$60 billion.
And it can't possibly be that Israel will come out of this unscathed. And getting the economy back on track, as I said, these connectivity initiatives have just vaporized for the moment. So it is hard. And when you're talking about their security, it's not just the security of the countries around them, because maybe nobody's going to invade Israel because they know they have very powerful backing.
Now
But
that you
then,
mention it, sorry, now that you
yeah.
mention it, just one larger question I had is
Mhm.
this entire thing about the Suez Canal, like control over the Suez Canal? Because I mean, like I've been watching a lot of videos preparing for this also. One of the things that keeps coming up is the West needs control over the Suez Canal because that's such a giant trade route. How true is that? What do you think about that?
Well, there are different conspiracy theories when it comes to who wants to try and control. The fact is, Egypt controls it,
Yeah,
and
Egypt
you
controls it.
know,
Yeah.
in the 60s, when the British did try to keep control of it against the Egyptians, India not only supported Egypt. I think at one point they were planning to send planes in to help Egypt with that. So I don't think anyone's taking it, but certainly what we were talking about just now, that IMEC in India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, was seen by the Egyptians as an attempt to to circumvent the Suez Canal. And essentially go via the land route, because it would go to Ras Al Khaimah in UAE and then on to Saudi Arabia, to Jordan and Israel. But of course, right now it just seems very unrealistic.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and okay, so coming back to Iran, so what is the Iran angle here? So, as far as I know, Iraq and Syria are essentially controlled territories, like with like very split away factions everywhere, etc. There is Lebanon, who is half controlled by the Houthis and half by a Lebanon government, and then there is Iran, who is backing Hamas, Houthis, and in Yemen they are also in Yemen they are Houthis. In Hezbollah,
Yes.
Lebanon Hezbollah, and then in Gaza there is Hamas, right? So, what is Iran playing at here?
Well, to start with, Iran, since the revolution, has been, before the revolution in 1979, Iran,
1979. Okay, yeah.
yeah, Iran and Israel actually had fairly good ties, the Shah of Iran and Israel. And they had exchanges and all the rest of that. And there were many Jews that lived over there as well. But after the revolution, Iran decided to take a very, very, very involved role when it came to supporting the Palestinian people. Obviously, this was about Islam. It was about the Iranian clerics and their beliefs that they must protect them and restore their homeland, if you like. And over the last few decades, Iran and Israel have really become, arch enemies. And so, what you're seeing Iran do by carrying out these proxy attacks on Israel is essentially, part of that war with Israel, if you like. Iran and Israel both are quasi-nuclear powers. I say quasi because they're not declared nuclear powers. So this could get much, much nastier. And both of
Yeah.
them try to, certainly Israel tries to get the international community to stop Iran's nuclear capabilities. The third thing you have to remember is that it's not just Iran and versus Israel. For the longest time, it was what was called the Sunni Shia divide
Yes.
between the Arabs and the Iranians. So a lot of these proxy groups, the Houthis, for example, in Yemen, what were they known for before you knew them for these attacks on Israel? They were known essentially for targeting Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia
Right.
oil facilities,
Right.
as well as UAE, where an oil facility was hit. So it was also part of Iran's war with other countries in the Arab world. What's happened in the last few years is that Iran and Saudi Arabia and UAE and all have kind of patched it up. Iran and Saudi have reopened their diplomatic ties between each other. It was a deal that was brokered by the Chinese in Beijing in February of 2023. And so, therefore, you're seeing much more of Iran versus Israel, because you could,
Correct.
in some ways, you could even say Iran is isolated. But what's happened, particularly post October 7th last year, I think is now the idea that most of that region, even if it is quiet, is standing on the same side as Iran when it comes to Israel Palestine.
Right. So, like, October 7th sort of escalated the and like already existing sort of Cold War. No, it was not a Cold War. It was a direct war, like very in patches. So after October 7th last year, it sort of escalated, and now we are seeing it on a next level. Um, connected to this is the US presidential elections also.
Right.
Because I was watching like some of the sort of debates happening just generally, especially from the Green Party, etc., who keep saying that Kamala Harris, even if she comes to power, they're not going to stop this. Trump comes to power, they're not going to stop this. So, at what point does the US stop this?
The US does not.
It
I
does not.
frankly, I would say that it is not possible for the United States to stop supporting Israel. It's codified. It's in the DNA of the polity there. However, I'll say two things. One, that yes, Kamala Harris has been tougher with Netanyahu in particular. Even their conversations, she has been very clear that the civilian casualty is unacceptable. Whereas Trump is just basically saying, "I'll stop the war." He's also saying, by the way, that he'll stop the civilian casualties, but it will all be really in favor of Israel. Remember,
Yeah.
the Abraham Accords was actually brokered by Trump's son-in-law,
Trump. Yeah.
not just Trump, Trump's
Trump's
son-in-law,
son-in-law,
Jared
yes.
Kushner.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be involved in the Saudi deal as well. So that's something they're still hoping will happen. And it was Trump who was able to get Netanyahu to give certain assurances he would not be attacking Palestinian populations at the time, because otherwise those deals would have been impossible. And one of the things Trump gave Israel at the time was of moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. Remember, Jerusalem remains
Yes.
part of the disputed
Yes.
dispute
Yes.
between Israel and Palestine. And India, for example, for years has supported that you must divide Jerusalem amicably between Israel and Palestine. But by and so as a result, this is something many may not know. Most countries don't have their embassies in
In
Jerusalem
Jerusalem. Yeah.
because they don't recognize that as Israeli. It's a disputed kind of area.
It's also very religiously significant, that whole place,
It's
and
so
that's
it's a
also
crucible of so many religions.
exactly,
It's a beautiful
exactly.
city.
Yeah.
But as a result, Trump moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in a kind of real concession to Netanyahu. So the sense is that if Trump comes to power, he'll cut a deal which will be favorable to Israel. If Kamala Harris comes to power, and remember, there is the point that her husband is Jewish, uh,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
and the fact is that she is seen as tougher on Israel, but it's essentially about rhetoric.
Yeah,
Um,
they'll never stop the weapons supply, money supply. They will never do that. So
correct.
it's basically then talk. Just
And the,
talk.
the second thing that you have to remember is there seems to be a sudden flurry. I mean, even for people who watch Netanyahu, and I've been watching him in a sense since 1990s, it is interesting how he has upped the ante, if you like, in the last month or two. Because just look at it, we're 1 year into the conflict since October 7th, and he's no longer just bombing Gaza. He continues to bomb Gaza, by the way, and even bombed West Bank, and we had attacks there. But he is not just bombing Gaza. He has now increased that to Lebanon. So first, Israel has not taken credit, but it is held responsible for the pager attacks. Then you
Yes.
have the bombings of, I think there were 8 buildings in Beirut that were bombed just to get Hassan Nasrallah and some of the leadership. Now there's been continuous bombing of Beirut, central Beirut, by the way, not the outer suburbs like what is called Dahir, where Hezbollah is supposed to exist. And then he has increased it to other targets. So, for example, Iran. and the targeting of Iran, of the Hamas leader in Iran, is all seen as provocations to ensure that there is also a conflagration there.
Yeah.
Now, why do you think that would happen at this point, where after 1 year, most people would be saying, okay, let's calm it down. We still have 100 plus hostages
Exactly. Yeah.
with Hamas, and we haven't discussed those yet. But it is it's quite something that at a time when your hostages are still there, and a year in, who knows what condition they're in and how they're getting fed. And if you're bombing the whole of Gaza, then how are these people getting access to water and food and all the rest?
So
But
now
at
is
that
it
time,
increasingly looking like, so initially I was like thinking of like Israel and Gaza as a limited sort of conflict in that area, but with Iran like getting super aggressive and US still supporting the Israel, is it now becoming an Iran versus US situation?
not yet, not yet.
Not
And
yet.
I think both the US and Iran have taken great pains to not make it that. Remember, Iran's fight back against Israel for all the attacks we've seen has essentially been only to respond on two occasions. One was, I think, the bombing of their embassy in Damascus in April, when
Right.
they sent those very slow moving missiles.
Right.
And then the Iron Dome sort of,
It
pushed
didn't
them back.
work.
And they worked, and everybody said, okay, no casualties, so it's a real flop show.
Uh-huh.
The second was right now, when in return for Haniyeh. But it's not, I mean, officially, Iran is not saying we are taking revenge or reprisal for what's happened in
So
Gaza
they're
or
doing the
what's happened.
proxy thing. Basically, their
And
groups are activated.
And remember, Iran is also, and there is a big difference. Iran is not bombing civilians. They're making a point that our targets are all military bases there.
Correct. Correct.
And that if somebody died, it was by chance, but we are not looking to do it. What they're trying to do, obviously, is to send the point that we have the ballistic missile capability and we can do this. But just to wind back just a little bit on the America question,
Yeah. Yeah.
the reason I think that it's being broadened in this big way at this 1 year mark is because we're a few days away from the US elections. And I think no
Right.
candidate in the US could afford to right now break support for Israel, right?
Yeah.
So Netanyahu knows that he doesn't just have a regular blank check, he has a really, really big blank check, which he can use up till maybe November 5th. And so he is actually sort of broadening the conflict.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. India. Where is India in all of this? So we have recognized Palestine as a state, independent state. We have not declared Hezbollah or the Houthis or the Hamas as terrorist organizations, while the rest of the world, Western world, has. Our prime minister went to Israel and had a bunch of deals. I think in 2022. I think I saw your video only in that. And he's also visited Palestine. So, and we are also sending aid to Palestine on one hand. And in Israel, we are doing like deals like Haifa port, and we are sending aid. Also, one fact check I needed from you on this front was that there was a missile found with "Made in India" written on it in Hamas. Sorry, in Gaza. Is that correct?
I'm told that was not sent by India.
Okay.
Um, but yes, I remember seeing those photographs with the Made in India sign on them. Look, I mean, it's
Are
it's a
we
little.
supplying weapons to Israel?
Well, at present, it's not weapons to Israel. There are Israeli companies that have JVs with Indian companies that where they license those Indian companies to make certain parts. The government insists it's non-lethal hardware
Oh,
that's going, but
okay.
those parts are licensed. They just literally put a factory here. It's that kind of thing. And when those parts started to go, also there was trouble. Remember, the Spanish stopped an Indian ship
Yes, yes.
because they said we're not allow any military parts to go. And the truth is that it's mostly Israeli supplies to India,
Huh.
not Indian supplies to Israel that you would see. But yes, certainly ammunition and that sort of thing you are seeing go out from India. Um, but there are so many others, and you really summed it up very well in terms of what are India's connections with Israel, what are their connections with Palestine. I would say with you know, it is confused right now. It is, you can
Yes.
see that there are such contradictions in our foreign policy. Because on the one hand, we say it's a terrorist act, but we will not ban Hamas, nor do we call
Sorry,
it a
is it
terrorist act.
confusing or non-aligned?
I don't even think it's unaligned. I think it's a contradiction in terms.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
have the prime minister saying dialogue and diplomacy is the only way forward. Of course, he was saying it for the Russia-Ukraine
Yeah.
crisis, but also calling Netanyahu. And remember, before the elections, he gave an interview in which
Yes.
he said, I called Netanyahu and told him to have a ceasefire for Eid. Of course, Netanyahu did no such thing.
Yeah.
But the point is that you're talking about peace over here, but at the same time, you do have these supplies going.
Hmm.
Thirdly, you continuously abstain on these UN resolutions, but you're India is abstaining on certain UN resolutions that call for a ceasefire, and at the same time, India is condemning Israel on certain UN resolutions. So it's a bit confused. And then you have Israel calling the UN agency UNRWA a terrorist cover.
Yeah.
And India has actually, in the last 2 years, doubled its funding of UNRWA.
Yeah. Hmm.
So there's all kinds of things going on. There's no
And
question that
as you
the
said,
Modi
there are
government
in
should
the
move.
peacekeeping force, there are Indian soldiers also in there.
903 in Lebanon.
In
In Lebanon.
Lebanon. Yeah, yeah.
They've
So
always traditionally Indians have always been
right, right.
part of that force, and
So
um,
why are we giving such confused signals? What is happening there?
well, I think Israel is a particularly important relationship, particularly for Mr. Modi. So
Hmm.
if you look at the history of India and Israel, in 1948, when Israel was created, India actually was opposed to its creation.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
felt that you must keep Palestine,
Hmm.
and then, if you are going to settle the Jewish population there, they must live as Palestinian citizens.
Yes, yes.
This was essentially because of Mahatma Gandhi,
Hmm.
who, if you Google, you can see he wrote some very strong words about the fact that this was a Palestinian people,
Hmm.
Palestinian land. So that kind of went on. And then in 1951, we actually recognized Israel,
Hmm.
but we didn't establish full diplomatic relations. So, if I know you're very young, but I can actually remember having a passport that said on it that it was valid for all countries except South Africa and Israel.
Oh, okay.
South Africa, because apartheid was still,
Appetite. Yes, yes.
yeah, so until the 1990s,
Yeah.
and Israel, because we did not recognize, we
Hmm.
did not have full diplomatic ties,
Hmm.
we did not have embassies. We had one Israeli consulate in Bombay that essentially worked with businessmen in Maharashtra and Gujarat, and there was a lot of diamond trade and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But over the years, the trade between Israel and India really, really went up. And there are a lot of
Correct.
Indian Jews who also took Aliyah, moved to Israel. Aliyah is that term
Hmm.
of people who move back to Israel, Jewish people from around the world moving back to Israel. And so what you saw was relations began to get stronger and stronger. At the same time, India continued to support the Palestinian cause,
Hmm.
as we call it. Yasser Arafat came to India,
Yes.
head of the PLO. And India funded the PLO in many ways, or
We
helped
were
fund.
also like trying to broker peace between the two during that time because Yasser Arafat was very close
Well,
to
yeah,
India.
I mean, but and Indira Gandhi in her time did have some, sort of missions sent to Israel dealing with them. We certainly used Israeli help
Hmm.
on certain issues, but it was all very quiet. In fact, Israel used to consistently say we're treated like the mistress. We can't come out and
Hmm.
openly have a relationship with India. But they continued that
Right.
path until 1992, when there was the Gulf War. There was a realization that India's economy was going to change, that India's energy security parameters were going to change. And there was a real sense that it was time to open ties with
Hmm.
Israel.
Hmm.
So that was under Narasimha Rao. And then slowly we saw those ties get more and more up front and center. I think one of the reasons India does feel a real debt of gratitude to Israel is during the Kargil War, when the US did not want to play a role between India and Pakistan, not get involved in any way. It was Israel that sent ammunition double quick that India really
Ah,
did.
okay. Okay. I
So
did not know that. Yeah.
there's a sense of gratitude
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
that. Indians and Israelis have, you must have seen a lot of Israeli youth come to India for that year they get after they finish their military
Yes,
training.
yes.
So in
Pushkar.
Goa, in Himachal,
Pushkar
uh,
is a place where a lot of
that's right.
yeah,
That's
Jewish people go.
that's
Yeah.
right. So there's been a kind of closing of ties, but when you come to 2014, this was part of Mr. Modi's mission, if you like, and I think it was for three reasons. One is because they're very strong, sort of a strong, should I say, connection with the Israeli sort of
Would you say
foreign
it's a
policy.
trade partner right now? I mean, like it's primarily that's the driver, or it's. I mean, you say there are
It's
sentimental
defense
reasons.
and defense for a while now.
Yeah, yeah.
India is Israel's biggest military
Hmm.
purchaser.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
So that is a very strong relationship. The second is technology because Israel has
Yeah.
technology, and unlike the US, they don't have a problem sending it to India.
So the
The third,
spyware and all
the
the
third is
intelligence technology.
exactly.
Yeah.
The third is stuff like surveillance,
Hmm.
Pegasus, and
Hmm.
all the
Hmm.
rest of that. So those are certainly things we have in common. Then there is all Israeli technology that really is meant for human benefit kind of things. So water desalinization projects, how to make agriculture more effective, and more productive. So the same cow will give more milk, or the same land will give more produce. If you use Israeli methods, they do that drip irrigation
Yes.
around the country. So those are all areas where India and Israel have increased their sort of relationship with each other. But I think for Prime Minister Modi, it has been personal. The fact that he became the first prime minister to go to Israel, the fact that Mr. Netanyahu was the first Israeli prime minister to come to India.
Hmm.
Those were part of, I think, the BJP has always had closer ties with Israel than the Congress party has, I think. But even so, there has been a
Sorry, just
desire to keep
one
ties.
little interruption here. Just one question I had. Another reason can also be the anti-Muslim rhetoric, right? Because of the way BJP functions in India, and like their general belief system around Islam, etc., and the fact that Israel is also anti-Muslim now, especially. It is fighting the Islamic world, etc. Because honestly, like on a very surface level, if you ever go on Twitter, Israel posts something, there are so many Indian handles who are like, "Oh, we are with you, Israel," la 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 la, and that is primarily because of the anti-Islam sentiments. Would you agree, or is that too simplistic?
No, unfortunately, Meghnath, I do have to agree that there is this idea because if you see, Islamic radicalization, or if you look at what are called pan-Islamist terror groups, so Al
Hmm.
Qaeda, ISIS, all the rest of those have always targeted Muslim countries.
Hmm.
There are some of these areas where you have a majority of one community and then targeting by
Correct.
pan-Islamists or other groups, like you've had Kashmiri groups or you've had Pakistani groups attacking India, like the Hafiz Saeed
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
and all the rest of that. So there is a desire to say, okay, Israel has a problem with Muslims. India has a problem with Muslims. And it is completely simplistic because there is nothing in common otherwise. There
Correct.
is
Correct.
nothing in common in the histories of the conflicts. There's nothing in common with the way
As you
those
pointed out,
conflicts
this
have
is
been.
also like a Shia Sunni sort of war
There's,
that is
there's
also.
all, I mean, to even to try and make comparisons is just banal. It's
Yeah.
just, it means that you don't understand the nature of the problem, the nature of how India has dealt with these issues as
No,
well.
but then my question is that this friendship, this sudden friendship between Netanyahu and Mr. Modi, did that have like a role to play as well? I mean, sure, you can say that the general average Joe is thinking, oh, हाँ ये Hindu Muslim fight चल रहा है या फिर anti-Muslim चल रहा है, etc. But
Well, we don't actually know what leaders say to each other behind closed doors. But I will point you to an Indian diplomat from the IFS who, at one point, was famously said at in candid camera. He was caught on some thing in New York where he said, "Well, for Kashmir, we could use the Gaza solution." And I
yes,
want to make that point
I
that
saw
India
that.
has never done that.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
India
yeah.
has not. We the Indian government, regardless of how tough and how authoritarian governments have been, they don't bomb Indian citizens. They don't use these kind of measures. against Indian citizens. So I really think that it's a real mistake to try and find parallels between the two. These are two very different
Fair
conflicts.
enough.
And if people do make those assumptions, I don't doubt what you are saying, which
Yeah.
is that there are a lot of people who just go, oh, problem is the same, so therefore
Yeah. Yeah.
they're on the same side. But it's really quite the opposite.
It's very complicated that way. I mean, like on the surface level, it seems like that, but it's not. Um,
And think about it. Al Qaeda and ISIS. I'm not saying this is like a conspiracy
hmm.
theory. I'm saying Al Qaeda and ISIS have not targeted Israel
That's true.
because of the kind of complexities when it comes to it. ISIS was targeting Syria.
Mm.
So it's a very, as I said, getting into the complexity of what is happening in the Middle East and trying to then extrapolate and say, "Arey, yahan par bhi yahi hota hai," is just a real
On
no.
that front, now I'm wondering in Syria, ISIS is still semi-active, right? I mean, it's there, it's
No, I
not
mean
there.
they were ISIS was finished in Raqqa, which was the
Yes,
land
yes.
there. So you might say that a group is operative, but it does not control land in quite the same way. The
Okay.
Syrian army has wiped out a lot of those
Hmm.
groups over there as well over time. Of course, the majority of the bombardment of Gaza that happened was done by the U.S. and actually by Russian bombardment.
Okay.
And that's why you don't hear about ISIS anymore.
Yeah, that's why we don't. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm moving on a little bit from there to, I mean, our foreign relations. Chat. By the way, if you have any questions, please do keep asking, because I'm also like sort of shaping my conversation according to your chat only, whatever you are saying. Also, sorry, Suhasini,
I
I'm
must
about
say
to.
your audience really keeps you on your toes. I keep looking at the
Yeah, yeah.
questions, and they're
I'm
10
about
steps
to
ahead.
scold them a little bit. Chat, don't be idiots. Please
No,
don't
they're
like
not.
no, no, no.
It's
But
all
like,
very
here's the
well.
thing. So like this is my space, and I expect my guests to be treated well. So I have complete right to scream at my chat. They know. So chat. By the way, listen. There is no need to take sides, friendos. You don't need to like fight amongst each other while we are like trying to sort of at a very basic level understand WTF is going on. Okay, so please calm down. If you have any questions, please do ask. Suhasini is also reading the chats clearly. Okay, okay, I want to move to domestic sort of our foreign policy. Primarily, I want to know what is happening with Bangladesh. So ek to there is this Bangladeshi Hindu sort of issue has come up again, where on one hand in Bangladesh, Hasina has left, and the Bangladeshi caretaker government right now is saying that we are like India is exaggerating the Bangladeshi Hindu problem. But in Bangladesh, there are attacks happening against minority Hindus there, because they are seem to be supporters of the Awami League. What is happening exactly? Because there is a lot of rhetoric here, both sides.
Of course, there is, and it's actually counterproductive.
Yeah.
Because the first thing one has to remember before we get into what happened in Bangladesh is that India is a secular country according to our constitution.
Yeah.
But it does have a very large Hindu majority, and right now the government in power does seem to be a majority. Does make that a case that it does stand up for Hindu majoritarian rights as well. Bangladesh is a majority Muslim country, but it does have a Hindu population, unlike say Pakistan, where the Hindu population has really, really decreased. Bangladesh still has, I think, 8%.
8%. Yeah. I think 170 million right now. Yeah.
And one has to remember that those are Hindus that have stayed on in Bangladesh through two partitions,
Yes.
or two sort of
One partition, one
ism.
liberation war. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And therefore, the idea that India is speaking up for the Hindus is it's a problematic area because it creates a reaction of its own in Bangladesh. Now, when the really all Sheikh Hasina had to flee the country, and all those protests really boiled over, reached the prime minister's house. What we did see was while there were protests, which were, essentially students coming out in protest, over time they took a very nasty turn, and we saw Awami League being really badly targeted.
Hmm.
And one, I think, producer and his son who were killed in their homes. There were others. There were a lot of killings and targeting of people who were seen as Awami League supporters. Traditionally, if you look at the parties in Bangladesh, the Awami League has always pushed for a much more secular line.
Hmm.
Sheikh Hasina has spent so much time in India, and that's something that she was very committed to always
Yes.
say that she spoke up for all communities inside her country. Whereas the BNP was always seen as a much more majoritarian Islamic party.
Hmm.
Now, as a result, where do you think the minorities would vote?
Hmm.
Who would they support? They are with the Awami League.
Awami. Hmm.
And
Because Awami is seen as a secular party, more or less. Yeah.
correct.
Hmm.
So we did see the targeting of Hindus in
Hmm.
some places, but I don't know if you're looking at the numbers that were killed in that period, and I'm not talking about the students who were
Hmm. Hmm.
killed by the Hasina government's orders, by the security forces and all that. I'm talking about those who were killed after Hasina left.
Hmm.
You may look at numbers of a few thousand,
Hmm.
and in those, the numbers of Hindus was a very, very small proportion.
Hmm.
It is it. This is all estimates are between 10 and 30, but you go according to what was seen in hospitals,
Hmm.
really. And that was much less. So it was
So,
much less than the actual population over there. And when journalists went there to speak to people, they would say, "Yes, I was targeted because I was an Awami League supporter. I was the general secretary of the Awami League."
mm,
And you would see that the same person's brother was not targeted in the same way. So I'm not trying to be a sort of denier of what happened. There's no question that horrible atrocities were committed after Hasina left as
hmm.
well
Hmm. Hmm.
on people who were her supporters. I'm not sure if it was purely a communal thing. It was, of course, the belief that Hindus did support the Awami League. And there are reports that continue. Like today,
Hmm.
for example, in one of the big temples over there, Prime Minister Modi, when he had gone to Bangladesh, had presented a mukut
Hmm.
for Durga statue there, and that has gone missing. So the
Oh.
Indian government has issued a statement saying we are concerned about this kind of thing that
Hmm.
targets
Hmm.
the minority
But this
population.
can this can escalate, right? So, for example, what you said, I was also coming to that, which is, so initially there is anger against the Awami League in general because Sheikh Hasina and she left and party is in shambles. So now there are attacks happening on the Awami League, right? Within the Awami League, there are supporters who are Hindus who are supporting the Awami League for obvious reasons. It's a secular party. They got, like maybe dignity, whatever there. Now that they're not in power, my question is this a chance? Is there a chance of this sort of veneer of Awami League going away and then a full on attack on sort of Hindus because they're Hindus starting there? Like,
Well,
will it go? Because it is a religious state at the end of the day.
not for the last decade or so, but yes, I mean, it has always been a contention of whether Sheikh Hasina spoke for the whole country when
Yeah.
she made it a secular country.
Yeah.
The fact is that the truth is that we don't know what's going to happen in Bangladesh because they're in an interim period right now. The army is in control. Mohammad Yunus is in control, and Yunus certainly, as soon as he landed back in Bangladesh in Dhaka, the first speech he gave was that no minority should be targeted, and he said,
Yes,
"If a
he did.
minority is targeted, I will leave this country." So, and he's made that statement again and again. So one part I know that it's not enough, but one part one must remember is that the leadership is not leadership's making it clear this is unacceptable
Yeah.
for them. Second, you have to remember, you can't. People will do as you do; they don't do as you say. So you can't say that if there is a lynching in India of one community and somebody from outside expresses an opinion about it, then we can't expect that when we make that comment about another country that they won't also take it badly. We took it badly here. So you can't have two standards. Either you show that in India minorities are safe, that in India the state is clamping down on any attacks on minorities, and that the leader himself or themselves are speaking out against it, or you will find that your neighborhood will do pretty much the same thing. So
Fair
I think
point.
you have to watch out for that as well.
No, absolutely agree with that. It so right now Bangladesh, how is the government doing? Is the government even active, or is it like a state of semi-anarchy right now?
Well, I'm told that the government is struggling.
Okay,
That while
so
there is a certain amount of
Mohammad Yunus
calm,
is the chief advisor to the
he's the
government.
chief
What is that?
advisor. You see, Bangladesh before, actually, Hasina did away with that practice, but Bangladesh before used to have this practice, and Pakistan has it as well. You may have seen in recent elections, where you don't go from one party to another party in elections. Before the elections, when the election process begins, whatever, 2, 3 months in advance, you hand over to a caretaker government.
Right, of course.
And that caretaker government is made up of officials, it's made up of non political people, right? And then you hand over, and then they hand over to the new government. So this
Right.
stops any kind of January 6th type of situation in these countries.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know whether that's what Yunus's job is, as to be a caretaker, but we do know that he's seen as a temporary measure, that he has only come in to stabilize the situation, to build up the institutions that they feel were completely demolished by the Hasina government. So the election commission, the law and order machinery, people who were seen as politically biased. And to rebuild that and to give the country a certain amount of economic stability so that they can then hold elections and whoever can come to power. Now, the question is, how long can that last? In
Is
2008,
there a chance of an army rule like in Pakistan?
well, I mean, the army is quarterbacking this regime, if you
Yeah,
like.
yeah. Because
Uh,
Mohammad Yunus has like some sort of army background, if I'm not wrong.
no, he has been a grassroots worker. Really, he's a social
Okay,
worker. He
fair
was
enough.
part of course, the liberation
Fair
struggle.
enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
And so he was a Mukti Jodha, but he's essentially, what he's most famous for is what was called Grameen Bank, microcredit for
Oh,
Bangladeshi women. And that is something he really built up through the 90s. This is what he got the Nobel Peace Prize for as well.
oh yeah. Darth
Where
Naik here is saying that he's an economist. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So he essentially has these. You should. I mean, he has written a few very very good books about talking about how to do this kind of grassroots economy, taking it up. So he ran the Grameen Bank that gave microcredit facilities. He set up the first revolution really of cell phones, cellular technology, if you like, in Bangladesh, where because they didn't have landlines. And I can remember going to a Bangladesh which had absolutely hardly any telephones. And then suddenly everybody was connected with just cellular to cellular technology.
Right.
So he has a long past, but he also has a long past of suspicion and antagonism with Sheikh Hasina.
Right. Right. But he's
So
fairly well respected. Like people are taking him seriously.
well, yeah, and then of course there are those that feel that he was essentially, very, very pro-America. After all, he was given the Presidential Freedom Award, even though Hasina was not, it wasn't something that was the government in Bangladesh was happy about. And in the last year, there were some close to 100 cases put against him. He went to jail for a bit in 2024 as well before he was released. So there's been, there is quite a lot of, particularly
Contention.
amongst Hasina supporters,
Yeah.
there are quite a lot of criticism of him being too pro-America.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so Bangladesh is one thing that I wanted to talk about, but also just quickly moving on. Then I will let you go. Modi's foreign trips. I was just looking at some statistics about the foreign trips that he has taken. So in 2018, I found an article that he has done 92 nations in 55 months. And they ended up spending something around 2,000 crore on those trips, right? They were comparing it with Manmohan Singh's trips. It's like an average of 22 crore per trip, which is similar to what Manmohan Singh also like spent, etc. My question is that was 2018. Now we are in 2024. Since then, he has gone even more crazy going around the world, etc. Is it necessary? Simple question. Is it necessary for a prime minister to travel this much around the world? B, what are we getting out of it as a country?
Well, Meghna, to begin with, every prime minister decides their own idea of a foreign policy.
Right.
For Modi, one of the big shifts, because everybody says, foreign policy has totally changed since 2014. I don't think so. Actually, in most areas, if you ask me, our foreign policy post 2014 is not that different from pre 2014. There is a continuity, there is a shift. It's all, kind of been all part of one flow, if you like. Where the shifts have been, where the big differences that I see is one, I think there's a lot more emphasis on business. That is, deals that are done when the prime minister travels. So if you see that as a benefit, that's one thing. Sometimes it becomes controversial, like did with Bangladesh and the Adani deal,
Or
because
the Haifa port.
say how the Haifa port or Kazakhstan or Australia, the coal mining, where it looks like the prime minister is pushing one businessman.
Oh, sorry, just
Um,
interrupting because you said Bangladesh and Adani thing. I was just reading a report recently that apparently Adani has written to Yunus saying that $800 million are pending. So they haven't paid Adani for the power that they supplied. So
and they have said we're going to review this entire
yeah. So
project as well. So
yeah. Sorry, I
that project
interrupted you.
is
Go
under
on.
trouble now.
Yeah.
And so what you have to remember is, one is that there is this business angle to the trips, which I think is much more pronounced than it ever used to be.
Yes, yes.
The second, I think, is the pitch to the diaspora, where Prime Minister Modi holds these big diaspora meetings. I think they've kind of slowed down a little bit because he's held so many of them already. But also, it's become a little more contentious who the diaspora is. It's not always a pro-government diaspora. When the Citizenship Amendment Act protests happen around the world, for example, those were all Indian diaspora out there
Yes,
who were
yes.
protesting. When it comes to the agricultural protests, the farmers' protests, again, what we saw around the world was these are also of Indian origin.
Also, in very interesting that you mentioned this because I was looking at the pro-Palestine protests in the US. Lot of Indian students and NRIs are a part of those protests who are like pro-Palestine protests.
Possibly, but it is dangerous for them to do that
Yeah,
because
yeah,
the
yeah.
US can deport you.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
actually, I think the embassies were quietly telling Indian students, you go at your own sort of peril over there. But I think the third one, and this comes to your question, is very much this idea of personality diplomacy, the idea of summit level diplomacy, that unless the prime minister goes and meets the leader of another country, that you can't carry out a relationship. Now that makes for very interesting stuff, because who was I mean, I think if you look back in the past, it was probably Prime Minister Nehru who did that a lot more. He personally went, he'd go to Russia for 3 weeks, or he'd go to the UK for 3 weeks, and he'd meet everybody, and it was all very personal. And you see that a little bit with Prime Minister Modi, that you will always see them saying no Indian Prime Minister has visited so and so country for 50
Yes.
years. He went to Ukraine, first Indian Prime Minister to visit since Ukraine was freed. He went to Austria, first Indian Prime Minister in 50 years. He goes, so the fact is he's doing something that prime ministers have not done for
Right.
whatever reason. You may think it's necessary, you may not think it's necessary, but he certainly does. And I think at some level, when you're asking what does one get out of it, everyone has a right to conduct foreign policy as they would prefer. So I think it is in a sense effective in today's day and age when it comes to social media and all the rest. You put countries on a map. My problem with it is it becomes a bit of a shadi, to the point that
Yeah.
all the relationship with that country you work on really hard leading up to the visit, and then you make your announcements. But when it comes to the follow-ups, you can't, because you're already going to some other country.
True.
And often we have seen, and we've covered a few of these stories also, where you see them going back to a country and then announcing the same deal again. Because there's just been no follow up and there are no new ideas, in a sense. So I think that's the downside of it. I as a foreign policy person, I cannot argue that it's not a good thing to reach out to the
Fair
world and
enough.
to be
But
connected with the world.
the one thing that I've understood about foreign policy is that diplomacy is damn boring. It is like a lot of negotiation happening between so many historical context, etc. Negotiation, intense negotiation happening between two PhDs, basically. So, in this environment, when a prime minister like Modi goes in and turns it into a shadi, that must be annoying. I don't know. I'm just saying at the surface of it.
Well, certainly, but maybe a lot of these countries are also doing the same thing. I mean,
Fair.
the hug diplomacy and all of that. The fact is, they are also doing it. Yes, it is. I'll tell you, for example, the African continent. While Mr. Modi's made many visits there, there's an India-Africa summit that they've not been able to hold for I think now it's 5 years or 6 years overdue, and we don't know when it's going to happen. So you do hear a lot of complaints about the fact that there isn't that bandwidth for it. There are other countries who will say that what was the purpose if you were not going to follow up. But in general, I think the real issue is a question of how much importance and how much focus you can give to a country. And if you're traveling all the time, there's an opportunity cost. And, I see actually a certain slowing down. You were talking about those figures. It'll be interesting if somebody was to actually number crunch and go first 5 years, how many, then second 5 years, how many, and now third 5 years.
Yes.
Because remember in the old days, Prime Minister Modi would always say, this is a 2-for-1 trip. I'll go somewhere, but I'll stop somewhere on the way. And on the way back also, I'll stop somewhere else. So you'll get actually for the same price of the plane ticket, you'll get 3 different countries. But you don't see that much of that anymore. In the last couple of trips to America and to other places, we haven't seen him really stopping over in the way he used to. So, maybe you've done it now.
You've done it.
It's a question of where foreign policy is, where actual policy is being decided.
No, and that whole thing you said about, the diaspora connect, I feel that has become more or less a primary thing now, which is like, because I see so many like videos, etc. of like, NRIs dancing around when Modi visits a particular country. I feel like, I don't know if foreign trips are just that anymore. I'm very doubtful now.
Yeah, and I have to say that it's great for optics, and it's really nice to see the Indian
Do
community.
you think it's great for optics though? And
Well, certainly over here it is great for optics, but think about previous leaders, and I look at some of the videos of Prime Minister Nehru when he'd go, it would be like all populations would come out,
yes.
on the streets. And it wasn't necessarily Indian origin people who were made the large part of it. I feel like by focusing on the Indian population, what we're forgetting is now when we look in these stadiums and all we're seeing is the Indian origin people. And like, what about the others? Aren't they interested in hearing what the Indian Prime Minister has to say? Is the one point I was making. The second is I do think it's a double-edged sword. Because if you're going to claim every person of any kind of Indian origin, we claimed Rishi Sunak, for example.
Yes.
And he, even his parents were not born in India. So
now we are claiming Kamala Harris.
Well, I mean, she has to claim herself.
Yeah, she has to claim herself first.
But the point is that you'll claim all these people, but then you're going to have to claim the others too. If you believe that there is a Khalistani movement out there, the people who are part of that are also originally of Indian origin. So it's your problems that have got exported to those countries. You see it, it becomes a double-edged sword. As I said, with the CA protests and farmers' protests, it really did come out. The third thing is this pride over leaders of Indian origin, which I think is very nice. All of us feel a little proud. Come on, this is where the Indians have gone, kind of thing. But at some level, we have to also consider whether it is in India's best interest, because a lot of the times these leaders are not able to cut the same deals because they're feeling, like they're under scrutiny for being of Indian origin.
I was just wondering. Yeah, exactly.
Or if you like Pramila Jayapal, the US congressperson who's very critical of India, then you kind of you have higher expectations of India than maybe a normal US Congress. So it becomes a little bit of a double-edged sword in that sense, and you have to think about it. Look at what just happened. We have a situation where, and then there is the question.
Sorry, just one interruption. You said about the Khalistan thing. Tell me if this was true. I read somewhere that when Modi was going to the US this time, I think Biden met like the people who were complaining against the attack, and then he assured them that they will get justice. The
Well, not Biden himself, but National Security Council officials in the White House
oh
met with
oh
three groups that speak about Sikh rights, and they came to talk about what they call transnational repression, which is
right.
essentially the allegation that Indian intelligence agents were targeting Sikh activists in the United States and
Hmm.
saying we need protection from this. And they said, yes, of course, we will protect you. So again, this makes things a little murky. The last bit is also if the feeling is that India is some way interfering in those countries because they've already got problems with Russia interfering in their elections. They've already got problems with China, setting
Hmm.
up police stations in their countries. They've already got problems with, all kinds of lobbies from different countries. Indians have not been seen as people who do that. Indians have always been, part. They assimilate into the culture and the
Because one thing I
political.
heard with this also is that Mr. Doval didn't travel with him this time for that
That's
very
right. And,
reason.
and there are many questions about why the national security advisor of the
Usually
prime
he goes
minister
everywhere.
and also the America relationship is something he really put
Yes.
about. So
Yes.
the fact that he didn't go may have had to do with the kind of messages and signals they were getting from the US. So you have to think about that. And another thing you may have seen yesterday was the BJP's foreign policy head coming out and actually distancing himself from a rally that's going to happen tomorrow. It's a kind of online rally
Okay.
where a BJP leader is hosting or promoting an Indian origin leader in America for Trump. So it's a kind of rally for Trump, and the
But
BJP's foreign policy head had to come out and say the BJP is not supporting any candidate. So all of this
oh,
kind of when it starts to get a little mixed up. Then you have to think about whether it is better to do it this way or is it better to do it as they did in the past. And certainly, Mr. Nehru was very clear that when somebody leaves the country, I thought it was a bit harsh, but he said they have chosen. They have chosen to go to other countries.
yes.
Let them be good citizens of those countries and not keep looking to us.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have to find your medium in that, but it is now becoming a trickier relationship.
Because I mean, one thing that comes off when I see these NRI diaspora sort of events is you have gone there to assimilate and become a part of that country, and then now you're like doing this outward display of how you are still like a not a part of that society generally. But anyway, that's my personal thing. But Suhasini, I know you have like a bit of a cutoff time also. So I'm going to let you go. But before I go, can you tell chat one thing which is someone had asked ki if they want to get good, solid information about what is happening in Bangladesh, is there a source that you can tell us where we can get it?
Well, I mean, Bangladeshi newspapers and news agencies are known for their kind of, they're all over. In fact, if you go to Bangladesh, you'll turn on television and you'll have somebody starting to speak very much like our show today.
Yeah.
But they will start speaking at about 9 in the evening until 1, 2 in the morning. You'll have television show will continue and they're discussing politics. They're very political people. I would say if you were to follow 2 or 3 Bangla newspapers, I certainly do follow the Tribune over there, which is very well done. There's the Daily Star. There are some translated versions of Bangla papers as well. That one follows. I mean, I would say take the news from them, and then you get your own
Correct.
perspective on that.
Correct. Another thing is book recommendations. Do you have any book recommendations for us?
For any particular
I mean, for I particularly want to know more about this Iran and of what is happening. So one is
okay,
that
so
the other can be general.
So an easy one on what's happening at the war is actually Talmiz Ahmad. He's a former diplomat, and I think his book is called "The War in West Asia" or something like that. And he looks at India's relationship and the relationship in those areas with each country.
Can you spell the name, please?
Talmiz,
Yeah,
Talmiz
Talmiz Ahmad.
Ahmad.
West
And
Asia at War, is
I
that the
think it's
one?
called West Asia. I would certainly say to your chat group that if you go to the Hindus website and look for worldview,
Hmm.
every time I do a show, at the bottom of the show, there are 5 to 10 book recommendations.
Oh, very
So what I
nice.
do is I just sit down and I say, on this issue, what are the books I've read that I really like? And if I'm repeating a subject, then what I do is I try and find new books to read. And sometimes it's just papers or links I put up there. But it's always a better thing than me telling you off the top of my head
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
are the best books. As you can see, there's a whole bunch behind me.
Yeah, yeah, that's what chat was also saying. Like, oh, I can see. Yeah, yeah, reading recommendations. I see. Yeah. So Suhasini's show is called Worldview, by the way. It's on the Hindu. It's a video show also, so you can go watch it. It's excellent. Like I go and often watch it. I have already given my complaints to you about this show.
Yes,
So like, but
it's drastically shorter than it should be.
no, yeah, but no, but
Um,
I really appreciate this. Any other books other than this that you're currently reading that you would want us to also
well,
like look
I'm
at?
really looking forward. It was supposed to hit the Indian market today. It hasn't yet come, but it's called War by Bob Woodward.
Okay.
And it talks about both Trump and Biden, and apparently
Oh,
has some real revelations of how those two administrations were working. That's certainly something I've enjoyed. I actually, as I said, follow the show just for the book recommendations. Forget everything else, simply because I really put a lot of effort into looking for books for
yeah.
people on different issues which they might enjoy. And and today, in today's age where people don't have that much time, if you think of one or two books that really sort of simplify an issue for you, that's most important.
Yeah,
There
absolutely. Thank you so much, Suhasini. Thank you for coming, and it has been a pleasure. Please keep coming whenever we have like major foreign policy questions. Please become our nerd friend on this channel. Like,
I'd be happy to, and I'm, as I said, I'm in awe of your chat,
yeah.
and of the community that you've built over here.
Yeah, like
So
you will afterwards when you see it and you see the chat, you will see how many insights people give while this was happening.
absolutely.
Also,
And there has been some fact checking and correction of stuff I've said. So I'm sorry, in
no,
live
no,
chat sometimes you do make mistakes or misspeak.
absolutely fine.
But
The
absolutely,
the beautiful thing about live is that you get fact checked real time. Just that you need to be humble enough to accept that you're getting fact
absolutely.
checked.
And,
That's it.
and of
I'm
course
okay with
we
that. Yeah.
they used to say in TV that you can never be too wrong for too long, because it's live, it moves on.
Yes.
In newspaper, you're held to it, and you have to issue a correction
That's very
the
true.
next day. So. But it was really a pleasure to be on Megnath, and I hope to continue the conversation.
Yes. Thank you so much, Suhasini. Bye. See
All right.
you.
Okay. Bye
Bye.
bye. Bye to everyone.
Okay, that's done, friends. I hope you had a good time. कहाँ पे chat किधर गया मेरा? Chat, hello chat. Hi, I'm here. Yeah, so the thing I was doing, chat, was that there is already a lot of research here done by Karan, Twinkle, and Vishnu from our Nerd Friend research group. So I was trying to take their questions and your questions and sort of meld it together and ask her, because I had so many of my questions. So I hope it was okay. I might have missed some questions, etc. Just forgive me, but I wanted to do this as a first level interview with her. Interview in the sense just stream, because I want to keep bringing her back to like do more with us. I feel like this was a good intro. I mean, if it was an information overload, धीरे धीरे consume करना इस episode को. Yes. Also, big thank you, big shout out to our nerd friends who have done extensive research on this. Got a lot of points out of it. Thank you so much. Yes, it felt like it needs a 5-part series. Yeah, exactly. So she had said 1.5 hours. So I wanted to finish like these 3 broad subjects in 1.5 hours. If you look at my notes, यहाँ पे side में मैं बताता है, रुक जा chat दिखाता है ना मैं. प्रेप किया. Yeah. Uh, I had done some notes here from the things, and I had to cover all of this, and there were these questions which were there, which I had to all cover. Plus, तुम्हारे भी थे, so all of that was happening. Okay. I am going to watch the stream again as well. Gaurav, I am going to do that as well. See, that's the advantage of doing this. Is Netanyahu's stance on Iran aimed at pushing US into direct conflict? And what's that? So I think Omkar, that was already answered. Badrista, thank you for the support. Animesh, thank you. Bangladeshi Hindu, I already answered. Like I asked that as well. Dark Naik, thank you so much. Say a hypothetical all-out war breaks out between Israel and Iran. Who more likely to receive support from India? Oh, this I missed out on. Apologies. That's a good question. What are the consequences of these countries involved in war? Don't follow international humanitarian law. Oh, Switchblade. Sorry, I forgot to ask her that also. But I will bring her back, and I'm going to remember these two questions. Other than that, I did like read those quickly and ask her questions. Apologies, friendos, but thank you for the support. I want to listen to Magnard speaking in Gen Z lingo. Gen Z lingo. Great discussion. Thank you, Manu. Atharva, Power Packed stream. Thank you. Had my dinner listening to this. Very tasty. Thank you so much. Switchblade. I'm glad. Okay. So I am going to pretty much end the stream here, honestly. Tomorrow I have to get up very early and go to Bombay's. So if you are around, again repeating, tomorrow at 6 p.m. Bandra, Jashna Studios, I am doing Democracy IRL. So come. Puneet Pania is opening for me, friends. We have done it. Puneet Pania is opening for me. And then I'm going to do my show. And then उसके बाद पुनीत का भी एक शो है. फन होने वाला है. And on, I mean, tomorrow morning I'll be at IFP World, and day after there is a panel with me, Manisha. No, Manisha has dropped out, by the way. Ooh, she has dengue. So it's me, Shamita, and liver doctor, and one more person who I don't know. Maybe it'll be last minute, but I don't know. So yeah, that's happening on IFP World on Sunday. So if you are there, it's at Mehboob Studios. So I'm going to be hanging around there in that area. So if you are around, come. And other than that, shows are out for Hyderabad and the Nagpurs. Hyderabad, is there anyone from Hyderabad? I have a question for you, by the way. Hyderabad wale, say hi. Say hi to Fadnavis. Yeah, of course. Vignan is there from Hyderabad. Sania Mirza is from Hyderabad. Thank you. Charles is there from Hyderabad. Tickets are available. Yes, Manu, they are available. Psychology, psychic. We are not Hyderabadi on the Discord. Oh, fun stream. Okay. Okay. A bunch of people from Hyderabad, I see. The show is at 11 in the morning on a Saturday. Apparently, that's a thing. Is that a thing? I just wanted to ask you because, I mean, my producers, who is Chalta Hai Comedy, said that's a thing. And I'm very happy. I've always wanted to do like early morning shows. I was like, what? Is this a thing? And they're like, yeah, it's a thing. It's like Hyderabad mein hota hai. I'm like, wow, that's nice. So they come for that. And Nagpur में तो 4 बजे है दोपहर को Sunday. Come. Arey, it's on the Saturday. I have seen my fair share of morning shows here. Oh, it's a thing. Oh, I love that. I feel like my Hyderabad show is going to be the best show ever. Honestly, I am the best in the first half of the day. So I feel like that is going to be my best show ever. Because 11 baje subah, I'm like, yes, I'm for it. Can new members be added to the Discord server? There is no Discord server. Madrista, there is no. I deleted it. My official Discord server. Okay. Okay, that's great. There is Shweta ने event का link भी share किया है. It is also in the description, so please come. And I'm going to see you, friends. Bye, bye, bye. I see you on Monday. Monday we are doing Bhagat Singh deep dive. Trish is here. Trish, we are doing Bhagat Singh deep dive on Monday, right? एक बार Trish को confirm करने दो, because I think it is on Monday. Trish. Research Queen Trish. Yes, yes. Okay, we are doing it. So Trish has guaranteed it. Now we are going to do it on Monday. Atharva is also there. Yes. Bhagat Singh deep dive Monday. See you there. Bye. Bye, 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 bye.